Hi, Misbah. Good to have you here. Both of us looking nice and pink.
Hi, Jahan. Good to
Far
see
as
you
the
again.
background. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's so good to, have a conversation. I know it's early in the morning and you probably have a very busy day. So let's get right into it. So you've been with I2I Ventures now 3 years, is it, or longer?
It's been 3 years or so. We officially launched in August 2019. So
Okay.
that's a bit over 2 years now. Yeah.
But a lot of people think that you're an impact investor, but you're not. So why don't we start out talking about impact investment and what it is, and especially in the context of the Pakistan entrepreneurial space. But you invest across the board, not just impact investment, right?
That's right. I2I Ventures invests in startups at the early stage of the tech ecosystem. We are sector agnostic. We are not an impact fund per se. We're definitely a commercial fund. But I think, Jahan, my co-founder Kulsoom Lakhani and I both believe that impact can be had in many different ways. And in Pakistan, there's a lot of opportunity to do that. So I think one thing that's important for us, and obviously, we're having this conversation in March, so it's women's History Month, and women are a big focus. But I think, for us, it is important to be gender inclusive. I think for VCs generally across the world, it's been a real struggle for women founders to get funding from VCs. So I think one thing that's important for us is to have a gender lens when we invest and be gender inclusive. And I think that means that going out and actually looking for good female founders, because if we sit back and we just wait for the funnel to happen the way it does, they'll get weeded out of the system just because of the sheer numbers being so small. So I think for us, it's important to look for good female founders. Once we have them in our pipeline, obviously, then the evaluation is the same as we would for any other company, whether or not the founders are strong, whether the business model makes sense, what the opportunity is in terms of what the company's working in. But for us at I2I Ventures, we invest in tech enterprises across different verticals. We do like founders that are solving big problems in Pakistan and not very necessarily looking at very niche products. And I think that's also where impact comes from. We have investments in fintech, in edtech, in agri-tech, and all of those kind of like go towards creating opportunities in and access to products and services where there's been very little so far. Of course, there's a whole employment angle as well. As our companies grow, they will employ more people and they will scale, and so impact comes from that as well. So I think there are many different ways to define impact, and for us, it's a much broader perspective in the Pakistan context.
And so once you invest in a startup, and I think a lot of investors now are co-investing rather than just, taking care of investment just on their own. Do you then, work with them, advise them, or is it just let's give them the money and then see what they can do? I know that you're very hands-on and a lot of mentoring takes place. So would you like to take us through that? Because I think many more investors need to learn to do that. I don't mean interfere in the running of the company, but actually provide the connections, advice, and all of that.
Absolutely. I think being, seed stage and pre-seed, early stage investors, we recognize that in an early market like Pakistan, there's a lot of support that's needed at that stage. Entrepreneurs need to be supported and helped along the way. We don't like being helicopter investors. We will not dictate to the founders what they should be doing. We don't get operationally involved unless the founders come to us with something that they would like us to get engaged in. So portfolio support after we do the deal, really, Jahan, is very important to us. We focus a lot on how we can do that. And we've learned a lot ourselves over the last 2 years, and we're continuing to focus more and more on how can we be better supporters after the deal is done. It's not just about writing the check and doing the deal. And that we do in several different ways. You may have seen, we've actually been putting out a few calls for talent. We do help our companies with hiring. It's, as you know, also, it's a big challenge in the Pakistan space. Generally, startups obviously, need to attract good talent that will help them grow at that early stage. And on the tech side is becoming quite a bit of a challenge. So I think for us, it's important to help our startups recruit, to find good people for them, We do that through our networks. We're doing that in a much more organized way now. And we have a few initiatives also, which we're rolling out with our startups so that they can actually get access, not just to recruiting, but then holding on to talent. How do you think about different personalities in the company? If you're a fast growing startup, how do you think about managing people? Every founder is not a good manager. Like, how do we help them become, sort of find their groove in that context? So talent is one thing, definitely, where support is an important aspect of the portfolio. The other aspect where we come in is using our sister company, Invest to Innovate, which runs an accelerator and has an insights arm, to actually work with the research team on that side to help them with research about either their users or aspects of the market where we can leverage that. And honestly, that's a muscle that we have. Really, nobody else in the market in Pakistan has that right now. But to be able to have access to a research team, we've had our research insights team work with one of our companies, TelloTalk, for example. I know you know them well as well. Last year, they worked on digging into their most active users, their power users, trying to understand, like, what are the users looking for, what do they want to do, and our research team really helped them figure out some of these takeaways. And then, along with what they were seeing from their analytics engine and their dashboards, this informed their product roadmap going forward. So it's a very concrete support that can actually help a company go from A to B in certain cases. And then the third thing, which I think we all do.
No, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, I think I have a bit of an internet issue today. I was just to complete that. The third thing which we do, which I think a lot of investors do, is think about what the fundraise needs to look like going forward. So we do connect our startups with investors potentially for the next rounds. We've introduced them to investors that have ended up leading the subsequent rounds as well, globally as well as in Pakistan. So I think that's an important aspect of continuing to support founders. But for us, it's really, a lot of it is founder driven. We don't like to come in and dictate what we should think we should be helping you with. And at the end of the day, Jahan, everybody says they're founder friendly and they provide support, but the proof is in the pudding. And if your founders say good things, then you're actually doing it.
Right. So tell me, with Kulsum based in the US and you based here, is there some demarcation as to, what role you play and what role she plays? I know she travels here a lot, so, we all meet her more often than we would with someone who's just based in the US. But is there some way that you sort of separate your duties or the way that you handle the portfolio?
That's a really interesting question, and no one's ever asked us that before, so I'll have to give it a bit of a think. Look, I think, Kulsum has built a startup herself, Invest to Innovate, for the last decade by being back and forth, being based in the US. So she's very much plugged in. When, like you said, yes, we see her a lot more often than we would a lot of other people that are based there. I think for us, it's less about who is where. Yes, I am on the ground, so I do get involved a little bit more on the due diligence side of things because I'm physically able to go and meet people. And also now that COVID is, a little died down and open up, I can go and meet people, but I can also look at diligence in the market. But aside from that, I think it's driven more about our personalities than our locations. So the way we work together is, she's much more a risk taker, to be honest, and she's great about finding that secret sauce within people and having a gut sense of things. It's also pattern recognition because she's been in the market for so long. For me, I'm a little bit more operational. I'm a bit more like, let's tick all the boxes. So I think coming together is a good combination. So we actually divide our roles more based on personality and experience. Of course, I have a fintech background. So if you're looking at a fintech deal, I'll get much more involved in the diligence side of things. But if you're looking at something, let's say in logistics or e-commerce, which neither of us have prior experience in, then either one of us will take the lead on digging in and looking at diligence. I think talent is something which Kulsum is very passionate about. So as we look forward in supporting our portfolio companies, that's something that she takes the lead in. I'm a little bit more of a strategy person, so I'm helping more on strategy. So I think it's a little bit more about our backgrounds and our personalities and less about where we're actually based, and just not enough hours in the day. But we actually often joke that our founders find us on WhatsApp 24/7 because when I'm sleeping at any time, she's awake, and when she's sleeping, I'm awake. So it's a 24/7 service.
Well. You complement each other, both in skill sets as well as in terms of timing, etc. So tell me, I remember when I2I Ventures first started, you were a women-focused fund, and then you went on to be a broad-based, all-inclusive fund. but you still look for good female founders. What are some of the emerging verticals in Pakistan where the number of female founders are increasing? And has this changed anything about the way these verticals are functioning? What value do women founders bring to some of these verticals?
Yeah, sure. I mean, and we've always been a holistic fund, Jahan. We were never women focused only. I think, like I said earlier, investing in women is important to us. Being women, we also recognize the bias. We also have raised for our fund, so we've been on the other side of the table as well. So we see what happens. I think for us, it's important to level the playing field, like I was saying earlier, and that means going out and looking for good female founders. I know Catalyst is running some programs around women entrepreneurs. Those programs are very important. I2I, our sister company, is also working with the World Bank on We Raise, which is also focused on women entrepreneurs. Those kind of programs are important. So there's a pipeline that we actively look for in partnering with organizations like Catalyst, like I2I, to actually find these women. I think what has changed over the last few years, not so much as verticals. I think what we're starting to see is that women are starting to self-select into maybe industries and verticals where they were not earlier. I think if you take a step back and look a few years ago, you'd find very few women in the startup space, but you might find them more in a fashion startup or a services startup, or perhaps even something around home chefs, something a little bit more domestic. I think now we're starting to see more women across the board. So we're seeing them in e-commerce startups, we're seeing them in logistics startups, we're actually seeing them in fintech. 2 of our fintech investments, actually 3 now, 3 of our fintech investments are female co-founded, which we're very glad to see. So I think it's becoming a broader opportunity, is being recognized that women can really do anything that they want to, right? And that it's about the qualifications much more than no-go areas. I think women are also gaining confidence because they see role models, right? They're seeing others in the space that are doing something, and there's a little bit of mirroring that we see over there, where they can say, somebody else is doing something, I can do it too. I've done a few talks at a couple of banks and other corporates where I've been happy to see a good, much better mix of women in the audience than I used to see before. And the good thing is that if we're talking about, I'm sure you've seen this too, Jahan, as we talk about the startup space, we're seeing much more women coming in and getting excited about wanting to do something over here. I think what's really interesting is, and I don't know if you've seen this, I'd love to hear your perspective as well. I'm going to give you now, is that I've seen a lot of either siblings or spouses with men and women actually coming together to form startups. And I wonder whether that's because of the trust factor often in our market, and people find women especially find male partners to be much more reliable if they are spouses. But I'm wondering if you've seen something, because this is a trend that I've kind of noticed.
Yeah, I have too. But what's interesting is that in most of those cases, it's the women who've started the business, who've struggled through the really difficult parts. And then the male founders or partners have come in once the startup is well on its way, which is very interesting. Like the hard work's already done and now you're coming in, but they seem to work out well. I think the men then take on a lot of the executional role, where the woman brings in the passion and the new ideas with which she started the business in the first place. I think it works well, as long as they don't take it home with them and,
that's the challenge,
their family
right?
life suffers, which we haven't seen. Actually, it's interesting that it has worked out very well.
On the question of women, actually, one thing that I will say, I mean, and this is not any of the companies we've invested in, because we actually take that out of the equation when we see it. But I have seen in broader startups in Pakistan, sometimes people will have a woman co-founder, but she'll have very little equity. She'll have like 5% or 10% just to tick the box. And that's not okay, right? I think it's, again, if that's what the experience merits, then fine, take gender out of it. That doesn't matter. But sometimes I feel like if you're just bringing in a woman to be able to say, we have a female co-founder and she has 5%, we always dig for that. And I think for us, it's important to see that there's an authentic relationship there between the founders, especially if there's a difference in gender there as well.
And also because there are some really good programs that support women entrepreneurs. So many of the male founders want to benefit from that and bring in a token woman, which, I'm always on the lookout for. That, this is not on. It should be a real woman founder whose passion it is to start and grow the company. And sure, if you're a part of it, that's great. But she should have sufficient equity so that she is in real terms, a founder. You're quite right. And I think everybody should watch out for that. So tell me, I mean, other than female founders and the challenges they face, what about female investors? And this is a global thing. Female investors also find it very difficult to actually attract the kind of funding that they need in order to do the work that they want to do. Why is that? And is it changing? We're seeing some women-only funds as well, which are cropping up, and that's great to see. But is there anything more that we can do? What is the reasons for that? Is it because it's traditionally not been done? I'd like to hear your views on this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sad situation, Jahan, honestly, and it's a global problem, right? I mean, less than 2% funding going to women, and in COVID, it actually fell, which is not great at all. And women founders of funds actually had the same issues. And that's why I was saying earlier that Kusum and I can really relate to female startup founders, some of the hurdles they come up against when they're raising money. One thing that I will say is a parallel between female founded funds and female founded startups is that when investors or potential LPs, limited partners, look at a pitch coming from a female founder, it's very interesting that a lot of times, if you have and there's studies that have been done to prove this, male counterparts will get aspirational questions. And females will get asked defensive questions. So questions males will get asked will be about like, where do you see the potential going? And females will get asked about like, how do you know that you'll be better than your competition? Just for example. And we've seen this ourselves firsthand as well, being, raising money for a fund. So I think some of the parallels are definitely there in terms of the biases that are inherent. There are a number of really great, I mean, obviously female founded startups, we're starting to see a lot more, both in Pakistan and globally, and female founded funds also. In Pakistan, so far, we are the only ones, and we hope that's going to change, that we are seeing more women come in as analysts, as junior partners into funds now in Pakistan, which is great. I think from a fundraising perspective, we actually have to go even further to prove that we have the chops to make it happen. And again, ironically, Kusum, because of I2I and what Kusum has founded, we actually have the most experience in the market working with startups compared to all of the other funds that are our peers in the market today. Yet we often joke that we've checked all the boxes for the extra marks that we're working in Pakistan, which is a high risk country, working at the early stage of the VC space, which is also high risk in itself, and then early stage even high risk, and then we're first time fund managers and we're women. So that does definitely go. I mean, I don't know if you saw, but Serena Williams just raised $111 million fund to make tech investments, and New York Times ran the article with a really lame headline and actually put the wrong picture. They did not put Serena Williams' picture on that article. And this is Serena Williams. This is the biggest tennis star. I mean, forget female tennis star. This is one of the biggest tennis stars in the world. And even they get it wrong for her. So there's definitely an inherent bias that's there, which we all have to kind of go beyond. And I think it just means that for Kusum and me, it means we just have to prove it by the work. We just have to get our head down, get the work done. But yes, we need to get the money in, because being a VC, we're in the middle. We need to raise the money and then invest the money. And we're well on our way, thankfully, thanks for like a lot of hard work that's gone in, but a lot of supporters that have believed in us, which we're grateful for. So I think it takes a few key people to take a bet on you. I think it's also about telling your story. And if I am sharing this because maybe it can be helpful to others, and this goes for startups as much as funds, I think we need to be prepared for the hard questions. We need to tell our story in a way that's compelling. We have had, mentors and advisors and friends who have given us feedback as we've told our story. Sometimes if it sounds too soft, quote unquote, that they've sort of told us, how to help tell the story in a way that does not sort of discount what we're doing. So I think for female founders also, I will say that that's really what you have to be ready for. And some of the questions that may come your way, learn how to respond to them in a way that's actually able to turn it in your favor.
Yeah, and not emotionally. Don't be defensive about it. Yeah. Exactly. No, I think as far as Kulsum and you are concerned, I think you put in the hard work, and there are a lot of male champions actually who are in your corner because they know what you're capable of, and that's the way to go. Just keep going on until you've proven yourself, and women founders could learn from that as well. And I've seen many of them do that. They just don't let anything bother them, and they just continue with the work. And eventually people have to accept that they're good founders, and they then invest in them. So tell me,
we found that women-founded businesses actually, on average, do much better than male-founded.
Absolutely.
The statistics are there.
Yeah. So tell me, the Pakistan startup ecosystem has been changing. The whole landscape has shifted in the last few years. What further shifts would you expect in the next few years? This could include, shifts in legal structures and ease of investing, in the kind of verticals that people look at. In the growth itself, are more and more startups in Pakistan now looking beyond the borders and wanting to grow outside of Pakistan. So as an investment fund yourself, what have you seen and what do you expect to see in the next few years?
Yeah, so many ways to answer that question. Look, we're in the business of taking risk, right? So for us, the opportunity is definitely there. Pakistan represents an opportunity that's not going away. It is still a risky opportunity. There are macroeconomic factors that are still, open. There's political risk that Pakistan always gets, we always get asked about, FATF hanging over our head, etc. So those things are there, but I think the market is also there. The consumers are there. The growing Gen Z population is there. The adoption of technology is there. Those are all positive things which kind of balance out a little bit of the bigger, broader questions around macro factors. I think too, in terms of where the market is, as you know, a lot has happened in the last year. Things have quite heated up quite a bit. The companies are raising more money at much higher valuations. I think there will be a little bit of a correction there to some extent, probably by the end of the year. I think we're also seeing this space where a lot of companies raise very early stage money, which is relatively a little easier last year and the year before that. And I think now as those companies grow, of course, new companies will come up and still keep raising new money. But as the companies that already raised will continue to grow, they will need growth capital. So I think one big, question mark right now is where's that growth capital going to come from? Can these startups that have already started on a good footing continue the growth and be able to attract the right investors? And frankly, that's where us and other peers in the market are also working very hard with our companies to make sure that, not only are they growing and they're on the right trajectory, but they're also and we're also then having talks with regional funds, with global funds to show them what kind of companies there are in Pakistan and see if we can actually bring them in. So, and everybody's kind of doing that to a certain extent. I think that's something that we'll keep on our radar. As far as the government is concerned, a number of good initiatives have already happened. The investing landscape has been eased up. Fintech, obviously, there's, digital banks, there's been a lot of engagement around that and continues to be. So I think with the new packages that the Prime Minister just announced, there's been a bit of ease on taxation, which is something we've all been talking about for a while. So I think it'll be good as we get a little bit, as that comes into law, a little bit more clarity will come into what that really means. Obviously, STZA is there, which is also a good step. So there are some good things happening. I think in terms of, what more needs to be done, this is a continuous conversation. I don't think this is a one and done, but I do think that now that we're on that trajectory, now that we can see how well startups are doing, the kinds of funds they're being able to raise, the kind of investors they're being able to get, people outside looking into Pakistan, I think the government and then even more broadly, generally bureaucracy and everybody in Pakistan can see the potential of what these young men and women can do to build for Pakistan. I think once we're going to see that start to build more and have more momentum, we're also going to start seeing Pakistani companies go regional. To your question, we've already started seeing that in some cases. Retailer, for example, launched in 2 markets. Airlift is also launching, in another market. And there are Pakistani companies that are starting to see that what the right time is for them to go into adjacent markets. I think for us as investors, we don't want to push them to do this too soon because the Pakistan opportunity is huge. So you don't want to leave something half-baked and then run after something across the border. Having said that, there's a right time to do that when you have a product market fit in one market and then you feel like you can replicate in others and move quickly, then there's definitely an opportunity because there are adjacent markets which are similar to Pakistan where our startups can start thriving and doing well. Similarly, we're going to see more of foreign startups coming in. We had Zayan, the Bangladeshi travel company, just buy out Find My Adventure, and which is great because it's a great sort of, it's an exit for the market as much as it is about outside investors looking in, outside companies looking in. And the last thing I will say, and in fact, this afternoon, I'm on a roundtable with Pakistan Stock Exchange and PSX on policies around startups and how we can help foster this. I think what I would love to see is a few more listings and as IPOs on the stock exchange, whether it's on the GEM board, which is the emerging company board, or whether it's on the main board. I think that's something that will continue to happen. I don't think we're going to see it very quickly, but I think we're putting the pieces in place to start seeing that. And that's also something that I feel like will need to happen really in the next couple of years, so that we can start seeing real exit opportunities in the public markets as well.
Yeah, and that's important for investors to continue to have faith in where this market is going, right? So
absolutely.
Tell me, are there any more changes that need to occur in order to sort of ensure that the startup ecosystem continues to flourish? Are there things that come to mind that haven't happened yet that we need to lobby for? Because, many of us have been involved in all these discussions, whether it be with the state bank or SCCP or the federal government or the local governments. There are things that we have pushed for, and some of us more than others. Is there something that still needs to be done that maybe we haven't done yet?
Look, honestly, I don't think I would say there's one big gaping area which we haven't touched on. I think, like you said, a number of us have been involved at different levels in engaging on policy. So things are moving, things are happening. I think a number of new initiatives have come in, and I would love to see where those actually go. So STZA is one example of that. There have been breaks that have been given in that. How will those be implemented? This is the time to find out. I mean, we have a mutual good friend, Javed Iqbal, who's now at STZA as well. I have great hopes for how this is going to be built out. There's a good leadership in place. So I think now the question is, how does that actually translate into action? There will be different government departments which will need to play their role in helping enforce what the STZA has offered to investors and to people that are setting up over there. That remains to be seen. I think, like I said earlier, with the package that the government has just announced and some of the relief packages, but also some of the taxation breaks, we'll have to see how that actually gets implemented. So those things, that's the work that's just started, not done yet. I think that those are things that need to continue. Jahan, are you there? Now is really the time to see how to actually make these things happen. It just goes beyond a policy announcement. So I think that's pretty important right now. A lot of good things have happened. I know on the state bank side, obviously the digital banks infrastructure, the digital bank sort of licenses have been floated. We have to see who gets those, what happens in that sense. I think that's going to be important in the banking side and the fintech side to see what developments happen. So I think this year for me really is a lot of where the rubber hits the road. Like, are we really making these things happen? Keniko, we've put some of these policies in place. It would be great to see. I think in terms of a conducive environment, I think we're all playing a role in helping more people get access to resources. I would love to see that continue. I think there are, we've only scratched the surface, and we recognize, you and I, we've talked about this before, we recognize the privilege that we have, that we, in the founders that we deal with, have also being able to access programs like yours, funds like ours, and we need to bring that to the broader Pakistani youth and people and public and people that want to enter into this. So I would love to see a continuing strengthening of this ecosystem from a support perspective as well. Would love to see more funds come up. Would love to see more, investors looking at Pakistan. I do think we need to build a stronger local investment setup, because if we can't keep relying on foreign investors and foreign funds, while there are blue chip funds, tier one funds that are really great signaling for Pakistan, and regional funds that are strong, that it's great to see when startups are able to raise from them, I think we also need to sort of support startups within Pakistan as well. And I think that's also important to see. And of course, this is not something that needs to be done, but something to keep an eye on is exit. So for an investment fund, obviously, where's the market going? Are there exits? Is this a viable market to continue to invest in? So from a very specific investor perspective, I think that's something that we would love to see, moving forward. I think we're already seeing a good change and healthy change in mindset, a can-do attitude amongst founders. I think we're starting to see founders that have had experience in other companies now coming in, building their own. And I would have to see that momentum continue. People that have learned at startups and have coming and setting up their own as well. And I do feel quite bullish about that. I think from a government perspective, would love to continue to see the longer term approach rather than being short-sighted. And see how fostering something now will result in a thriving ecosystem another 10 years from now. Look, we've been in this space for this long, right? Everybody comes and says, wow, in 1 year this happened. This has not happened in a year. No. In 2 years, that sea change did happen, that sudden switch did come on, but the work
but it's due to it's due to a lot of work that has been put in over the years by many people.
Exactly. So, right. And we're still doing the work now at this early stage of the market. We're all still doing the work for what's actually going to transpire in a few years. So that's what I would love to see continue, is like that approach to just making things happen.
Okay, one last thing. I was recently in the UAE attending the STEP conference, and a lot of people that I met there are talking about MENA and Pakistan in the same breath. So because MENA, most of the countries in MENA are very small, they're looking to Pakistan as a big consumer base, as well as a place where they can do, joint ventures, work with people, invest in companies here. So number of, the conversations that I've been having, do you think there is more scope now for people or startups from the MENA region coming in here and partnering with companies or startups within Pakistan? Do you see that happening and that helping a lot of the founders to grow beyond our borders?
I do see it happening. And, I'm most excited about countries like Egypt and companies that are coming from a market like that, because there's so many similarities with Pakistan, both in terms of, the population, the economic strata breakup of the country, and how things are actually, what's broken and also what's working. So definitely excited about that. I think what I would caution against is blind copy pasting something that's worked in Dubai or Saudi to come into Pakistan, because the markets, the average ticket size of deals is very different. The average basket size of goods is very different. The average spend on items is very different.
And of course, very income levels. The taste of people is very different.
So, the mindset is different. The income level is different. So I do think that there's definitely an opportunity. I mean, again, Careem is an example, right? Pakistan was one of the key markets for Careem, but so was Saudi and so was Egypt. And it was all of those three diverse markets that actually gave it the momentum. So I'm all for exchange of that sort. I do think that companies that have raised a lot of money, that have money in the Middle East, in MENA, can actually acquire businesses in Pakistan. I would love to see some of that, because that just means that they're coming in and partnering with people over here who already have on the ground experience, rather than building something from scratch. So I would love to see a lot more collaboration than blindly, people coming from the outside coming in.
Right. No, it's great. It's exciting times, and we're really looking forward to seeing what the next few years hold for us as an ecosystem. But really, I mean, a lot has happened, and you're right. It is due to a lot of work that many of us have put in over the years, but a lot more needs to happen, and we just have to keep at it. Thanks, Misbah, for your time, and it's been great talking to you. I'm sure a lot of people will find out much more about, where our ecosystem is at and what your thoughts are on it. And let's carry on the conversations.
Thanks, Jahan. It's always lovely talking to you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.